So I'm here with Robert, an expert in strategy, communication, and process improvement, and we're really going to dive into some of the tangible, actionable actions on how to go into process improvement, some of the things to be thinking about, and to get his deep insight on behind the scenes. So, Robert, tell me a little bit about yourself, your experience, just a little bit about your career.
Well, thank you, Lucas. I actually like the word tangible because I'm a hands-on person. And so in my practice at McGrew Solutions Incorporated, we are a firm that focuses on strategy, communications, and process improvement. And the reason for that, with focus on process improvement, is because everybody needs some help at some point, even myself included. And I'm my own worst critic when it comes to that too. But I love helping people in general. And the basis of it is that all of us can improve in one way or another. So taking my experience from my years with Fortune 1, Fortune 50, and Fortune 100 companies, being able to take all that experience from the different projects that I've worked on, the people that I've met, the travels that I've done, the systems that I've seen and implemented, and taking all of that together, putting it together with the message, communicating it properly, but having a strategy behind it.
Oh, that's great. So I know from, at least from our focusing on who we're really speaking to today, there's this concept of diving into more of that process improvement. So I want to hear, how did you, as far as from a career perspective, how did you get into the process improvement world? Like what led you to that? Was there some kind of breakthrough moment, or just how was your journey come about?
Absolutely. There was a moment, and it comes with the need. And that's where most opportunities come from. And it's whether you're willing to take the bull by its horns, and in this case, I was. Nobody wanted to grab the bull. And so I said, I'll jump on the bull, just tell me what I need to do. And that's what they did. So long story short, in an area that I was working at, I was not a systems guy, but we needed to update our back-end systems and do something different. But that also meant that we needed some knowledge from the front end, which is what I was capable of. And the area that serviced us didn't know those systems. They knew systems, but not those systems, because it was very specific and niche to what we were doing. And so I started learning how systems work, how the databases are added and implemented, and I actually started doing it and tying it with the business process. And so there was a need. Somebody needed to understand both sides. Somebody needed to process the system implementation itself. And then there was a third part where we had to teach people how to use those systems and, of course, ultimately use them. And so out of that, that's where I became famously known as a dumpster diver. And so most of my career, I have jumped into dumpsters and found my way out.
Man, so you kind of mentioned on the piece of systems and kind of how your journey into that a little bit. From a small marketing team, what's the first step to building a scalable system? Let's say they have a lot of multiple things going on, but what's just the first step to just dive in, but not too far?
So as I mentioned a moment ago, it's identifying a need, okay? And identifying is not good enough. Yeah, we can all say, I need this, or we should do this, or we should look at this. The second step in that is acceptance. So now you've identified a need, and now you accept that you truly need to do something about that need, right? So that's the second step in the process in going out and understanding what you're wanting to go towards.
So would you say, as far as seeing that need, so I'm just thinking from a marketing manager's perspective, they obviously know that there's a need for, let's say that they have a lot of things going on, that there's no, how would I say, they have some form of structure in the team, like, okay, you're going to be doing this task, but as far as the system of, hey, we go in, we create this campaign, we go into do X, Y, Z, it can be a challenge to have, okay, to know how do you systemize a process that's maybe changing or that you have a lot going on.
So it's a great question, and that's where a lot of companies fall into. I know what needs to be done. A lot of times it's not what needs to be done. It's kind of like treating a cut. You put a Band-Aid on, you're treating, the symptom, not the root cause, right? You're not getting to the underlying piece of why it's hurting, what have you. And same thing in business. I think I know what's wrong, but it's not really what the underlying problem is. The second piece you touched in there too is being able to know that you've got systems in place, but not all systems work for the same thing. And too many times as a business, we want to utilize this system for all cases, and that's not the case. And especially in marketing, when it comes to client base, None of your clients are the same. And so you've got to treat each one a little different. And so in process improvement, there's what they call the 80-20 rule, right? Let's get at least 80% there. If it's there, then let's go with it, and we'll work on the 20% along. But a lot of people want 100%. And you spin your wheels, spend your time, money, resources on trying to achieve 20% before you ever release anything.
So I know you touched on a little bit of that piece of the root cause of essentially that concept of the Band-Aid when there's a problem. Is there a way to define how do you get to that root cause from a process standpoint? Is there some ways that you can identify, well, this is the root cause, even though our systems are out of place, that you can go in and figure out which parts need to be fixed or which ones maybe need to be left alone?
So I'm an avid chess player.
Okay.
And if you're not a chess player, you might not get this completely, but I'll try to explain it in the best way possible. I play chess every day on an app, and I've been playing since I was a teenager. One of the reasons I love this game is because it is strategy, and I talked about that earlier. You have to be strategic in what you're doing. And so when I make a move, I've already got the next 5 moves planned. And somebody says, well, how is that possible if your opponent hasn't moved yet? And that's not relevant. What's relevant is your strategy and where you're trying to go. So the same thing here, when you're implementing a program or a pilot with the client, the strategy should be based on what the client needs and try to get there as fast as possible. So again, going back to that 80-20 rule. If I can win you with 80% and wow you really quick, I can work on that 20% as we move along. But you have to be willing to fail fast. So I kind of have that entrepreneur mindset, kind of like a startup does. They try things, doesn't work, they scrap it, they move on. But too many times we get stuck in trying to make everything work first before we try to move it.
Yes, and I like what you mentioned there as far as almost the concept of failing fast and also trying things. I know like in the marketing world, there's a lot of different things that are changing and you have to reintegrate and do A/B testing, but then also specifically for marketing budgets or budgets as a company as a whole can be very, limited if you're working on a smaller budget. So being willing to navigate and figure out which is the best time spent to make sure that you get that 80% there. Is there a way, once people get to that 80%, would you say it's more or less optimization and just trying to get the rest of 20%? Is there a time frame of, okay, when we know we've got around 80%? Because some of the stuff it can be very, I think we're at 60, but maybe they actually are at 80% there. Is there a way for people to tell?
Well, I call it playing darts. If you ever played darts, you get 3 darts, right?
Yep.
You throw them. If it sticks, you get a point, you get score, and you add it up, and maybe you win, right? If they don't stick, then what do? You pick them up and you throw them again, right? So kind of here in the same manner, when you're working with the client and getting to the 80%, it's the understanding of what the client really wants. The client can tell you that they want the wall painted blue. But if you don't ask the next questions, well, what shade of blue? Then you're going to come up with the blue, and they're not going to be happy with it because they're going to be like, I didn't want that. You said blue, but I didn't ask any further. So asking more questions, getting more detail up front is best. And you talked about the 80-20 percent there, and whether I chase that 20% or continue working, refining it. There's a secret. A lot of times, 80% is 100%. Not always, and not for everybody. But a lot of times you go through the process, and especially working with your client and bringing them along, you'll find out that 20% was just noise. It was kind of want to have or thought I needed. And a lot of times it wasn't, and it doesn't have to be. And so then you're at 100%.
Yes. Well, honestly, that's really interesting because a lot of people kind of have it as said of that 80% is where, is almost that line of where they need to have it at, and anything, understand, like, okay, well, if that is 100%, because sometimes we try to do 120%,
Right.
and we get stuck in the details. I'm guilty of it, definitely, like when trying to work on something, we have to get it like 135% there in order to get that process or that system down, and then something changes or we have to adapt. Maybe can you kind of speak into more of the aspect of, I know you talked on asking questions to make sure you get the details on maybe even what success is, or even this aspect of asking those questions to get to, how do you know if you're at that 80%? I know oftentimes from a marketing perspective, it can be difficult if we have a certain initiative of, let's say, if we want to say driving sales is a very broad one. if let's say the owner's asking, hey, let's create sales, but then you get into the aspect of, well, what specifically are we going to try to drive? Is it
Right.
is it trying to get more customers in or things like that? So, is there any type of systemization on that you go through in terms of picking the best options to go about? Maybe ways of thinking about what systems need to be placed, and then maybe what are some things that don't necessarily have to have systems?
Well, I think you just touched on it a little bit, using sales as an example, digging further into details. And the more that you can get up front, the better off you're going to be right away, okay? And so one of the best exercises, very simple, let's start with sales. Your boss says, let's increase sales. Great. What does that mean? What's the number? What's our goal? Okay, let's say we're trying to reach, excuse me, $100,000 in sales. That's the goal. Now we have something to work for. Okay, great. What kind of sales are we going after? Are we going after all industries? Are we going after a specific industry? Are we going after a specific type of businesses? So digging further in. And then once we've got that understood, okay, now with that, are we going for large firms, small firms, medium firms, nonprofits? What's the next step? So keep digging in. And then after you get to those points, and this is a very easy exercise you can do, and you can do it with Post-it notes as well. Then you go through the next step and you prioritize. What's more important? Going after this industry, getting this amount of sales, getting this type of business, and you start prioritizing that. And then you have a plan that you can go after. You start working in that plan to achieve your ultimate goal.
Mm-hmm. So I know we kind of touched on those different pieces. When it comes into the aspect of workflows, and once you start to create some of those processes, okay, we know we're going to be working on this specific initiative, and we're going to start diving into it. What's the best way to visually document their marketing workflows?
Well, and it all depends. It's all kind of personal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people like digital, and there's a lot of digital tools out there that we can use, and some like more manual. So I talked about Post-it notes a minute ago. And the reason I went with that, because it's simple, easy, and it's something that people can grab right away. You can go into most people have some in their drawer right now. You can go grab it, start marking some stuff, and put it on the wall. And then it's visually there. And as a team, you can visually work on it immediately. Digital, you can still do the same. There are some tools out there, and especially in today's remote world, so you can use those tools and kind of do the same thing with the digital Post-it notes. And then you have to have a session. But you have to come together, and the team has to align that this is what we're going to do. Everybody's got to agree that this is the manner, the method, the system we're going to use.
And definitely, you touched on getting the team together. I know that can be really challenging or sometimes difficult, especially if you have a system that people aren't familiar with or comfortable with. How do you even get those people on board if it's maybe a new system? There's maybe not as much, maybe you've tested it out, it works for you. But how do you work with systems when you're proposing that to a team member or just a small group of teams?
Yeah, nobody likes everything, and I haven't found anybody that does. If you do, let me know, because I'd like to talk to them, and I'll interview them myself. But no, it is hard because we're all different people. We all think differently. We all need and like different things. But you have to have somebody who's got some leadership to help guide everybody in a direction, but you have to bring everybody along, okay? And so I can't come in here and tell you, this is the way it's going to be, use it or lose it or get out, and some people do, and that's unfortunate. But really, coming in, saying, this is what I'm proposing, Lucas, what do you think? Get your input. Get the other people's input. Everybody's input comes together. Not everybody's going to get to what they want, but people want to be heard. And that's a big thing, especially even with clients, they want to be heard. And that's probably the biggest thing that anybody could add value to themselves, to their business, and to their clients, is active listening.
That's really good on that active listening piece of making sure, especially when you have a lot of different ideas. I know from a creative side of the marketing world, there's a lot of ideas that we might have, and trying to find a system and then proposing that to people of like, well, okay, why are we doing this? And we have to jump through these hoops to get to that X, Y, Z. So that's really good as far as the active listening, and especially just from working with people and making sure that they understand what's going on, but also that we hear their questions, or if they have things where they're, well, is this really even going to work out? If there's certain questions in discussing, that's great.
Yeah, and the active listening portion is where people do struggle a lot in it, but we could actually gain so much more. If we understood each other a lot better, we would know how to work with each other, because some people are very literal and other people's are more abstract. but we take it that everybody's the same. And I'll go back to my example of painting the wall blue. And this was actually happened in a project that I was on, not the wall, but
Yeah.
the example in the sense that somebody was in a meeting and they said, paint the wall blue. And my team was like, paint the wall blue. And we got back in a huddle and we were like, Lucas said, paint the wall blue.
Yep. Word for word.
Word for word. So who's going to go paint? Who's going to go buy the paint? Who's going to start painting? And I was like, guys, wait, that's not what Lucas meant. He's like, yes, he absolutely said that. And I was like, but that's not what he meant. What do you mean? That's what he said. And it was like, no, it was a figure of speech. He doesn't even want the wall painted at all. And everybody's like, what? I was like, trust me, he didn't want the wall painted. He just wanted you to listen to something else. And then we went on to the next topic of what it was. And they didn't believe that. And so in another meeting, they validated it. But sometimes, again, it's knowing that person.
Yes.
Knowing if that person is literal or not, knowing how that person speaks and how they say things, and then bringing it back and applying it properly.
I really like how you mentioned about, I guess, even understanding what they're trying to communicate and all that communication line being clear, and even how you even touched on a little bit on the second, even having that second meeting of even discussing and ironing out maybe even some of the questions that may be not understood. If someone's saying one thing, okay, are you for sure that everyone's on the same playing field to understand?
Correct.
On the communication side. So what's the most effective way to train new marketing teams on existing systems?
So again, depending on what you're wanting them to learn, but in general, you should have a process in place. Everything in our life has a process. And so you have to have a basic process in place, and that's an easy thing to teach somebody. That can be done by a manual, it can be done by video, it can be done in person, and I can show you what my process is. At the same time, I've got to be open that that process isn't perfect. So going back to that 80-20 rule. I hope that my process has a good 80% vantage point. And then when I bring you in and start teaching you that, you may point something out. You may point a flaw. People don't like flaws and they don't like to be wrong. And so they resist, right? And then what happens? I start pushing back on you.
Yes.
And you're the one that's wrong. And you don't know what you're talking about. This is my place. This is my process. This is my plan.
Yes, I can definitely see from the aspect if you're over a marketing team and you're kind of the leader of it, and then if you create a system and then there's some Swiss cheese holes on some certain things, but it's 80% there, and then and then some people start to kind of pick out those different pieces. Do you think it's good to come more upfront about, hey, this is a system that we're trying to implement and go about, and then being upfront about that versus getting defensive on the communication side?
I do, and actually using sales as an example, this actually happened to me one time where our account exec left, and I'm a big relationship builder, as you know, and I know a lot of people and connect people and know both business and system sides. And so my team was supporting and saying, hey, you should put him into that position. And then the person that was over the larger account said, well, you don't have sales background. And you're right, I don't from this standpoint, but I have systems, I have people, I have processes. And they were like, okay, I'll tell you what, we'll put you through our program, and in 3 years, you can come back and be this position. And I said, no, thank you. I don't have 3 years that I want to go do and learn all this. And not that I'm afraid to learn. I am. I love to learn. I do. But in this particular case, it wasn't necessary. But again, it goes back to what you were asking a moment ago. If I have a plan and this is my sales plan, and if you can't meet it, then you're not part of it. And that's not completely true. And there's a lot of people that are hungry and able and willing, but we don't put the right people in the right places sometimes.
So, and I'm even thinking from the aspect of, I know as a small team and as a small company, we can be wearing a lot of hats, like 7 different hats or 5 different ones, or even if you're in the marketing world trying to jump over of building the graphics, and then you're sending out, different campaigns and trying to work the sales, even some. Is there on a system sides that you would say from a team that's maybe working on the smaller side that having those hats ready, but marking them of, okay, I'm jumping into this role. Is there certain systems or ways to make sure that you keep your roles organized?
Sure, and it goes back to knowing people, right? So using your example a moment ago with sales and video and design, editing. Let's say that I hired you for my marketing firm to do sales because you just came from another place where you did sales and you did pretty well. and you applied for sales because that's what your background is, that's what you know. But maybe you don't really like sales. Maybe you're just doing that because it's a way for you to make money and you can get into there. But as you're working with me, you really like the video side. You really like the editing side. You really like creating content. Then I should lean into that because you will make me more money by doing those things. And in some cases, it actually costs me more to hire somebody specifically for that. But a lot of times people do things just because that's what they're used to doing and hiring because it's the title, the background experience, and that's it. But we don't lean into passions. And if we did more often, we would get a lot more. And so if I know that your passion is in video, then I should lean into that and forget about you doing the sales, and I can get somebody to do sales that is passionate about that.
I really think that's definitely kind of a unique perspective of, instead of thinking, okay, is this person in or out, but maybe where you can fit them that would leverage their skills to help the company grow, and then finding other people to fill those gaps on that are maybe better, more skilled, and can get even paid even less on for certain things depending on the roles.
Just depending on the role, but in a smaller firm like marketing, it's easier to move people around, and you have the ability, to do that versus larger corporations, which I think actually medium and large corporations should be thinking about that, but that's a whole different story for a different time. But at least in the marketing aspect in smaller firms, move some people around a little bit. Lean into their passions, lean into what they're excited about.
Oh, that's really good to hear. Just from your insight and where we're at. So just kind of landing the plane. What is just 3 simple things that you wish marketing managers would know when it comes to systems?
3 things in landing the plane. I like that analogy, by the way. So put your seatbelt on.
Okay.
Open the window, and make sure your landing gear is down. And I'm saying that on purpose for a marketing manager, that put your seatbelt on. Understand what your plan is. The plan with the seatbelt is there for a purpose, right? Your plan, it has a purpose. Know your purpose, know your plan. Open the window. Be open to suggestions, to other ideas, and that you may not be right. And that's that 20%, okay? And then your landing gear is just being prepared. Being prepared that if things don't go the way that you expect it to, in a good way, you're going to land, you're going to be okay. But sometimes things, don't work the way that they're supposed to. Landing gear sometimes doesn't work or doesn't pop open the way it's supposed to. And that's okay. You adjust to it. Back to my chess analogy, you adjust to the movement. And so have those things in place, and then your systems will follow along if you've got those.
Well, honestly, I really appreciate your insight, Robert, on just the whole world of systems and the way you think about processing things and organizations. So where can people find more about you? What do you have, first of all, what's going on in the Robert Sean world? What do you have coming up, going on? And then just a little bit about where people can find you as well.
Sure. Well, thank you, Lucas. I appreciate the time and ability to share. I love sharing. I love helping, and I'm a solutionist at heart, and so I go straight to the problem, the root of the problem. You can find me on LinkedIn, Robert Sean McGrew, McGrew. You can also go to my website at mcgrewsolutions.com. And what's going on? We've got all kinds of things. I'm really engaged in our startup world locally, and even on the world level, I became a mentor with Startup World Cup. And so you'll be hearing more about that as well. So follow me on social media, and I'll be happy to connect with you.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Robert. I appreciate you coming on.
Thank
Thanks.
you.